Hi, this is Ted and Chad with Urban Greens, Iowa City. We've put together a compilation of videos to help show how and why we grow the greens the way we do at our urban farm. As you walk through the door, the first thing you notice is our washroom, followed by a row of our grow racks. The washroom is particularly important because we needed an isolated place to be able to wash our channels and tubs and carts and process our media without the risk of contaminating the greens that were growing simultaneously in the same space. At the head of each column of grow racks is the water system, where the reservoir, pressure tank, pumps, timers are all located. We have a couple different racks that we use as workstations for planting and other activities. We have different structures built around the water reservoirs to try to maximize space for storage and other workspaces. Pretty much everything in this space has been custom built, both as a means for affordability as well as to address specific problems that we were trying to address at the time. We use 250-gallon IBC totes as reservoirs, and our pumps fill pressure tanks that keeps our system pressurized at all times for consistent and predictable water volumes during our cycles. When the timer opens a valve, the water flows from the head of the channel out the 1/8-inch tubes and is carried by gravity towards the back of the channel.
What are we doing here? So today is a harvest day at the Urban Greens production facility, and in front of us is one of our grow systems that we call a grow bay. So today's a harvest day. How can you guys harvest? So our production schedule allows us to harvest twice a week, which we've found to be beneficial because as a locally based company, we wanted to be able to do 2 deliveries to all of our customers every week because greens are a typically delicate, highly perishable product, and offering 2 deliveries a week allows us to have the freshest greens possible on the shelves and in restaurants. Okay. So this is all hydroponic. How does this work? So basically, this system is vertically oriented. Each row can grow independently of the others. And the smallest feature of these grow systems are our grow channels, which allow us to plant individual varieties in each of them, and then in a manageable size, which allows us to move them around and during germination processes, planting, all that sort of thing. Yeah. So have you guys always grown this way, or have you guys started off with a different method? No, actually, this has been a progression where, early on in the business, we were growing traditionally in 10 by 20 trays in soil. And then over time, as we wanted to expand our production, we wanted to, make things more efficient. So we went from top watering all of our trays to coming up with kind of a semi-hydroponic system where we did flood and drain so that we could underwater all of our trays, and then eventually we moved to a full hydroponic system like what we have today on a smaller scale. So what are you guys growing if it's not soil anymore? So we use a media which is inside each channel that the seeds are planted into and the roots grow through, and really that allows us to have better control over our watering cycles, and also the media gives the roots something to grow into, a little stability, which we found to be beneficial for their growth. Gotcha. You can reuse that. Yep. That's a reusable media, which was a big advancement for us. The first types of media we were experimenting with were disposable, only one use at a time, and even tended to start to fall apart in the channel before even our harvest. So what kind of lights are these? So Urban Greens settled on full spectrum LED lights. That these particular units are meant to replace T8 or T5 fluorescent lights. These lights are much more electrically efficient, and they generate much less heat and last years longer than traditional fluorescent lighting.
And do you keep them on 24 hours a day?
Yeah, just about. From the beginning of its lighting cycle after germination up till harvest, most of our growing days are 24-hour lighting. We do have a few dark periods sprinkled in throughout, which we've found through trial and error seems to increase the overall growth rate and the health of the plants.
So what do you have growing?
So right now, Urban Greens is offering 5 products. We are focusing on some of the most robust growers, nutritiously dense varieties. And so right now we're growing a couple of varieties of bok choy, some kale, arugula, cabbage, mustard greens, and radish greens.
Nice. And so how old are these plants?
So at the time of harvest, some of our varieties are as young as 14 days, and some of our slowest, oldest growers are 20 days. And so over time, a lot of trial and error, we've kind of developed a system where our planting schedule allows these different varieties to be different ages, and then the harvest date coincides and allows us to kind of take advantage of the biggest and healthiest growth. So we're harvesting the most volume with the healthiest greens. They're not too old, too woody, and also not too young and delicate. So we get good shelf stability.
So how do you harvest this?
So really, our media that we've been working with allows us to go ahead and pull the greens out of their channels, and then we hang them vertically to harvest because that allows us to take advantage of gravity.
Very nice.
So what are we doing here?
So we've got our greens hung up, ready to harvest on our harvest cart, and basically we're going to harvest this stuff, and it's going to fall vertically into a tub. We keep everything up off the ground, movable, allows us to harvest basically anywhere in our space. Everything, all of our operations, we are really preoccupied with efficiency, least amount of handling, and that sort of thing.
Gotcha. So what do you have hanging here?
So the greens we have hanging up here are a mix that we call our Purple Power. And what you see in front of you is this is a red bok choy, a red Rambo radish, ruby streaks mustard, and some red acre cabbage.
Nice, nice, nice. And so why'd you choose these greens?
So these products go into a mix called the Purple Power Mix, and so obviously you might imagine that these were chosen because they are the red and purple varieties of these vegetables.
Gotcha. All right. And so what does this cart do? How does this thing kind of work?
So this is a prototype of a device that we're looking to use as we scale up, and it allows us to move around and collect the greens from the bays that they grow from. And we found that our operation, we spend a lot of time moving from point A to point B, carrying one thing at a time. And as your scale increases, that involves more and more trips, which takes more and more time. And so this cart allows us to take essentially a good mix of products. We can harvest it all together, and then when we're finished, the poles which hold the greens are removable, and that allows us to move on to our media processing operation, which again takes a sizable amount of time in our day-to-day operation.
Gotcha. Because it's all reusable.
Exactly.
Gotcha. And so how do you harvest them?
So we've used a number of different harvest devices over the years, starting with basically scissors and hand trimming our trays, followed by straight razors, and once we went vertical with our harvest systems, we realized that we could use something that was a little faster, a little more efficient, and so we use really light, handy battery-operated hand trimmers.
Gotcha.
Lets you basically give the media, the greens, a quick trim straight into the tub, ready to go in the cooler.
Gotcha. And so then what happens to the greens, like you were alluding to, what happens after you harvest?
Well, because we're able to mix our greens up as we're hanging them, we can go down the line. It allows the greens to be kind of mixed without handling. Every time you handle your greens, they start to take a little damage, shortens your shelf life, and this allows us to handle our greens as little as possible before they get into our package. We do our harvest straight into the tub, throw the lid on the tub, and it goes to our cooler, where it cools overnight, and it's ready to be packaged and delivered tomorrow.
Gotcha. Very cool.
Hi, Chad. What are we doing today?
So today we are doing a planting day.
What's your planting schedule like?
So we plant twice a week, kind of like how we harvest, but after the harvest on Mondays, we will then plant on Tuesdays, and then after the harvest on Thursdays, we will plant on Fridays. So we have a continuous kind of rotation of greens that are going in.
Where does this process start?
So it starts with the water. The most important thing in hydroponics, as it kind of says in the name, is the water. So whether it's the planting water or the water that's used for the actual growing, we have to make sure that certain parameters are kind of maintained for it to be in the ideal growing range. So we pay attention to pH, the EC, which is the electrical conductivity, which is the amount of nutrients that's in the water. We don't measure for it, but we also aerate, which adds dissolved oxygen to the water, which is one of the most important things for plant growth. And it all starts with the reverse osmosis filter, because all the water has to have all of the impurities out of it for it to kind of be a blank slate for all the nutrients to then be added to it. And that reverse osmosis water is actually the water that we use to then plant into as well. And so we start by taking the RO water and filling it up in the bucket, or in the 55-gallon drum, and then we get the water moving around, and then we also aerate it, and then we use the Blue Lab to get it to the ideal pH, because generally reverse osmosis water comes out at a really high pH, so we have to get it lower down. And so once we get it at the ideal pH, then we'll add the media to it, and then the media also inherently kind of brings the pH up, so we have to let it kind of equalize for about 20 minutes.
Is this the media that we've always used to grow?
No, actually, we started with soil in 10 by 20 trays, and then once we made the switch to hydroponics, we started using burlap and just kind of long strips of burlap, and that worked great. But the only issue was we could only use it one time, and so it started getting pretty expensive to keep on having to buy and cut burlap every planting. So we started experimenting with several different types of fabric. And after a bunch of trial and error, we've kind of found the right fabric that works for us. All right, so now we're going to add the media to the RO tub. And we're going to let the water kind of move around with the pump. And then while that's happening, the Blue Lab, what that does is it has a little probe in there. And that probe measures the pH, and we set it to the parameters that we want it to. And so in this case, it's 5.8. So as the pH rises from the media, it'll dose in with the doser of a diluted acid solution. And then it moves around. It takes about 20 minutes for it to equalize. And then we'll also add this aerator stone that'll increase the dissolved oxygen. And then once we plug that in, we let it equalize, and then we plant. All right, so now while we wait for the water to equalize, we'll go over and get the seeds ready.
So what's that in your hand?
So these are the ramekins that we pre-weigh out for all of our seeds. This one is arugula, and every variety has a different density that we've come up with, and they all get weighed out ahead of time as opposed to weighing them out right before we're about to plant, because when you have to do 80 to 90 channels twice a week, it ends up taking a lot of time to weigh out all the varieties while you're trying to plant. So this just kind of helps out with our efficiency. We have hundreds of these in the cooler that's ready to go whenever we're ready to plant. We just go grab the different amounts of each variety, and then it's ready to go into the channels.
What was important to consider with your planting densities?
So when we were first doing microgreens, we did the typical really heavy density for the microgreens, and that works great. But if you want to grow baby greens and get them a little bit bigger, once they started growing bigger at those densities, a lot of the undergrowth would die and rot out because of the competition. So we had to start reducing the amount of seed densities, and through trial and error with every one of our varieties, we found the kind of the sweet spot for maximum yield per channel, but also the minimal amount of wastage that we used to get.
So how do you plant your seeds?
So how do we plant our seeds? Basically, we'll take it from the ramekin, and then we put it into one of our little seasoning shakers. And then depending upon the variety, we have two different lids. Almost everything uses this lid, and then the radish seeds, which are a little bit bigger, goes with this. And so then once we get everything ready to go, we'll just shake them on top of the fabric. And so we have 6 of them ready to go here because our workstations allow us to plant 6 channels at a time in the most efficient way. So now we'll go check out how to do all the channel situations. So this is our planting station. We store all of our channels up here, and then we bring them down, set them right in place. They sit there really nice so that we can kind of just take them out to go set them in their final destination.
So tell us more about these channels.
So these channels are prefabricated to pretty much any length that you want. Ours are 6 feet, and we chose to do 6 feet mainly because our first growing space was a very limited area, and so we wanted to make something that was pretty maneuverable. And since we started with that, we pretty much have just stuck with it. We've explored the option of going to 8 feet, but we feel like that might be a little too cumbersome and won't fit in most 3-bay sinks. And if we go any smaller than 6 feet, we feel like we're not maximizing the efficiency and the maximum amount of growth that we can get from our base.
So are there any other important features on these channels?
Yeah, so the water basically comes in here. That's where the feed line starts out, and it will water the plants. It flows down the slope and then comes out the drain at the end. And it looks like our pH is ready to go. So what we do now is we'll take out the prepared media, remove this over, slide the media in, get it all nice and flattened out, and then we have our pre-weighed out seeds that are really handy, ready to go. And then we just kind of shake them out evenly throughout the channel. Just like that. And then once the channel is full of the seeds, take our sprayer, give them a little rain on top, and then from there we'll bring them to germination. All right, right, now that we got everything planted and sprayed, we will add it to the germination cart. So let's take it over here, add it to the cart.
Have you always used a germination cart?
We have not. We actually used to just germinate in one of the open bays. We would have a bay that we would completely dedicate to germinating. And what we realized is that if where we're germinating over here and then we have to bring it to a bay over there, we have to walk 90 channels each time, and that ended up taking a lot of time. So now if we use the germination cart, after they're germinated, we can roll 20 of them at a time right to their final destination and then just load them all into the growing bay. So it really cuts down on the total time that we took moving things around.
What are the white things on top of the channels now?
So the white things are what we use to kind of trap the humidity inside of the channel for germinating. And so these are just corrugated plastic that has quite a bit of insulation value to it. And so once this is put on, all the humidity is trapped in there. These things protect it from excess heat from the heater, and they also keep everything kind of nice and calm in there, and blocks any type of air movement or wind that would negatively affect the germination.
Do all the seeds germinate at the same time?
They don't actually. So some of our varieties, like arugula, are very fast germinators. They germinate in 2 to 2.5 days, whereas the cabbage could take up to 4 or 5 days. So having these individual germinating covers allows us to kind of be a lot more adaptable. With if some of the channels are ready to be uncovered, we can pull them off and leave the ones that are a little bit slower on there for more time.
So what's next in the process?
That's it. So now we will let these guys germinate, and in 2 to 3 days we will uncover them, put them in the growing bay, and then repeat the process every 3 days, twice a week, every week of the year.